Hello, and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I am a journalist, I'm a human, and I'm curious about AI. So sometimes AI is silly, sometimes it is scary and terrifying, sometimes it's wrong and dumb, sometimes it's really freaking wild and interesting, and sometimes it has legit, super profound, and positive impact for humanity. That last case is what we are here to discuss today. There are those, including my guests on this pod, who think that potentially the most impactful use case of AI will come in drug discovery. Simply put, AI can be very, very good at analyzing oceans of data and making surprising connections that can take scientists a very long time to do the quote old fashioned way. So today we're discussing this issue with not one, but two different CEOs of sister companies that are working on AI and drug discovery and longevity. The first is Kennedy Schaal, CEO of Rejuve Bio, a startup that is working on drug discovery and speeding up the process with AI. The second is with Jasmine Smith, who heads up Rejuve AI, a startup that is working to gather and build a model of more inclusive data that better reflects all of humanity. Because let's face it, a good chunk of the data that scientists use right now to model solutions and drugs is frankly fairly skewed and biased, and we can all guess what that bias looks like. So these are kind of two different sides of the same coin. And we really get into what the current problem is now with the world of drug discovery, why it takes so many freaking years to make medicine and effective drugs, how AI can speed up that process, how AI can make this all more equitable, and how ultimately AI can help all of us live longer. If that's not a laudable goal, I don't know what is. I learned a ton from my conversations with both Kennedy and Jasmine, and I am excited to share them with you. And frankly, I am excited to follow the journey of Rejuve Bio and Rejuve AI. They're both startups in their early days. It will be exciting to see how this all shakes out. So in the first of not one, but two conversations today, please enjoy my chat with Kennedy Schaal, CEO of Rejuve Bio. And then don't go away. Right after that, we'll be back with Jasmine Smith, CEO of Rejuve AI. Kennedy, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So let's start with the current baseline, with the problem you guys and AI are trying to solve. Tell me a bit about the current state of drug discovery and how it can take so freaking long for scientists to kind of crack the code on these different drugs.
So drug discovery, as everybody knows, is very slow. It's technically a 10 to 15 year $1 billion or more process. And the main reason for that is obviously the regulatory framework that we have. I mean, especially here in the United States, there's lots of regulations, and a lot of those regulations are very appropriate because you want to strike the proper balance between innovation and patient safety. But the problem that we kind of see is that the human biology is enormously complex, right? And so you spend all of this money and all of this time on kind of the initial steps of drug discovery, which is thinking of a pathway to treat, thinking of trying to figure out a molecule that will treat those pathways for your specific disease indication. Figuring out the structure of that molecule is usually very important for how it's going to work in the human body. And, you do all these like in vitro experiments going down that road, which is in a that's the fancy word for in a petri dish. in vitro
Mm-hmm.
experiments, and then you go to kind of mice and rats and higher order mammals. But even going through all that stuff, the drugs still fail like 90% of the time. And it's because
Mm-hmm.
we are not very good at translating how a drug is going to work in an in vitro or a smaller order animal model to complex human biology systems. And then, of course, you have
Mm-hmm.
the extreme heterogeneity of the human population. What When a certain medicine works well in a certain human population, it might not work well in another human population. And that makes
Right.
it very hard, especially from the commercial and business aspect of drug development, because a lot of these pharma companies, they're pouring a lot of money into this drug development. They need to make that money back, and so it's to the point of, like, serving kind of underserved populations, or diseases that don't have such a commercial viability. It makes it very difficult to make those predictions of what drugs are going to work with the current system that we have.
Where does AI come into play in all of this? What are the you kind of describe a chain of steps that have to happen that take years and years and years to go from idea to over the counter or prescribed medication.
Right.
What are the most promising steps or links in this chain of where AI can speed things up?
Right. So AI, and I mean, full disclosure, I'm sure that this bias will kind of come through, but I'm very excited about AI, and for all the doom and gloom that you hear about AI, like, I think the most promising aspect of it is in biomedical research, and is in new
Mm-hmm.
medicine discovery, and really optimizing our healthcare system. AI, and we're kind of at this perfect point in human history now where, like, AI can really be utilized and where it's appropriate to be utilized. So we've amassed like massive data sets throughout as long as biomedical research has been around. We have massive data sets on genomes now. The Human Genome Project was completed not that long ago. People are going and getting their genomes sequenced. We're sequencing tumors for specific cancers, specific mutations that have to do with different diseases that people might be suffering from. So we have all this data, and not only do we have all that data for humans, but we have like a ton of data for animal models as well. And so what AI
Mm-hmm.
is really good at is taking these vast amounts of data and making sense out of them, finding those connections that we would otherwise miss. AI can also be useful because it can certain types of AI, neurosymbolic AI, which is what we focus on at Rejuve Bio and Singularity Net. Neurosymbolic AI is actually particularly adept at even taking smaller data sets and making sense of them, because it's got multiple AI tools that can step in and kind of do heavy lifting when the larger AI tools can't make sense of a smaller data set, which is very useful for, if you're studying a rare disease indication, something like that, where your data set might not be very large.
When you say making sense of large data sets, can you maybe give an example of what type of data set you're referring to and how the AI would be able to identify a surprising relationship or pattern that we humans might have overlooked?
Let's just say, for example, you have a particular you have like people who have a certain type of lung cancer with a particular tumor. AI would be able to tell you maybe the specific genetic mutations that that population of people have, um, what kind of proteins those genetic mutations actually will code for down the line, how those proteins are shaped. So then you can it helps you develop a molecule then that could counteract that. That would be that humans eventually we could come to that answer like on our own, but it would just take so much longer. Like, as you've seen, like, I mean, that's what a lot of our medicines are, the mechanism of action is based on now, but it's taken so long to get there.
What are we talking about here when we say speed things up? are we talking what might take scientists with yesterday's tech 3 years of just churning through these permutations and kind of brute force pattern, trying different possibilities?
Right.
The AI can go from 3 years to 1 year, or to 3 months, or to 3 weeks, or I know that there's no exact ratio here, but kind of ballpark, kind of a sense of how fast this is moving now.
Well, we can use a real world
Great.
example for that. So there's a company called In Silico Medicine, which is probably one of the more famous AI drug discovery companies that's out there right now, and they have a molecule that is going into human trials for pulmonary fibrosis, I believe, and that molecule went from conception to human trials in 18 months, and it was completely AI built.
And normally,
So that's a process that
yeah.
ordinarily would have taken probably about five
Wow.
years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty like best case scenario these days right now, because in silico is definitely probably the furthest along of like any of these like AI drug discovery companies right now. But I mean, even you have Google's DeepMind, which is working on protein foldings. Figuring out the correct structure and folding of a protein is a crucial step in drug
Mm.
discovery that has taken years and years and years. Normally takes scientists years to figure out the structure of a protein, how it's folded, how it reacts in the body. Google's DeepMind, their AI platform, can predict the structure and the folding of a protein like based on its amino acid sequence.
Given those stunning results, what's the lay of the land as far as in the drug discovery and pharma world? I would think that everyone would want to get in on that action. Are most drug discovery companies trying to inject AI into their workflow to speed things up, or are they a little more hesitant and say, we don't know if we want to go there yet?
The smaller biotech companies, the startups, as a community, we're all pretty AI focused. We're all using AI in some respect, either for drug discovery, or at least data, at the minimum data analysis, clinical trial analysis. In the case of Rejuve, we have the two arms. We have our AI data collection through the app, through Rejuve
Mm-hmm.
AI's company, and then data analysis and drug discovery on the Rejuve Bio side from that data that gets collected from
Mm-hmm.
the app. So we're kind of on both sides of the coin right there. But yeah, for smaller startups are definitely using a lot of AI. The bigger drug discovery companies, you hear about probably a couple times a week now. Some of these bigger companies like Pfizer or
Mm-hmm.
Sanofi investing in these smaller startups that have these AI capabilities and starting to bring it in. I think it's going to be on the larger big pharma side. It's a little bit of a slower uptake, which is kind of funny because they have the money to really like make it bigger if they want to. But I think it's because the current regulatory infrastructure isn't quite ready for AI yet. We saw a little bit of that in January. The FDA did formally remove the requirement for animal testing
Mm-hmm.
before a drug can go to human
Mm-hmm.
trials. That was a bill that was passed, that was introduced and passed by Senator Rand
Mm-hmm.
Paul, from more of an animal rights
Mm-hmm.
perspective. But it also gave a nod to the increasing capabilities of modeling systems biology from an AI perspective, and how computer modeling and AI modeling is getting more advanced to the point where it can accurately predict how something is going to affect the human
Mm-hmm.
body and predict its safety and efficacy profile. But it's still going to take a little bit for the FDA to really realize that, we don't need all these extensive, expensive animal trials, and they're actually not that predictive and not that effective in getting drugs to market
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So I think there's kind of like this very slow sort of domino effect that's coming, where it's really like kind of a grassroots movement, where you have these smaller startup biotech companies that are using AI. Big pharma is kind of like, starting to pay attention, taking them up, using this AI in their drug discovery, but then also using the traditional in vitro and in vivo modeling to kind of validate it and check it out, which is necessary, which we need to kind of prove our point. And then I think it's going to speed up once the regulatory infrastructure catches up.
That's super helpful. And also, I think I realize I might have a fundamental misunderstanding of something. So I'm glad that I'm gonna try and clean it up for myself and possibly for some listeners. I think I had imagined that in any drug discovery, there's first let's call it the computer molecule and protein designer and finder work that kind of like creates this theoretical computer bat base I'm visualizing here in some cool movie scene, like, just the digital, atoms and chemistry stuff, right? There's that part. That's like phase one. Then I was
Right.
imagining there's phase two and phase three. That's the in vitro testing stuff and the animal tests. And then eventually you get to like, okay, ta-da, approved for FDA, approved for use in humans, or maybe a human trial, whatever. I think I might have understood that wrong. Am I hearing you
Yeah.
correctly that the AI infused process not only speeds up the, let's call it the quote computer phase, but actually is so effective at suggesting possible molecules and pathways that it could replace and um, obviate the need for this in vitro phase and the animal testing phase. And so it's actually, that's how the timeline
Yeah.
shortening is. Yeah,
Yeah. I
those
mean,
phases are actually going away entirely. And that's what's speeding things up. Am I getting that right?
yes. I definitely predict that animal research is going to be phased
Wow.
out over the next probably 10 to 15
So
years.
this has the benefit then, to state the obvious, has the benefit of A, dramatically speeding up the drug discovery process, and B, from an animal rights and reducing animal cruelty perspective, has the potential impact to um,
Right.
stop that use of animals in experimentation.
Yes, it does. And I mean, yeah, like the big goal is to create this like, in silico model of the human body and the human biology
Mm.
systems. And if you have predictive AI that will tell you how a molecule, how a protein, how a drug is going to work in the body, I mean, there's you've removed the purpose for like subjecting some poor like mice or rat
Right.
into this this process where their service, though noble, is not necessarily indicative of how something's going to work in the human
Got it.
body. And the computer actually does a better job of predicting how it's going to work in the unique environment that is
And
the
to
human
kind of
body.
abstract this one level up a little bit, I'm guessing that from the FDA's perspective, thinking with a risk, they're saying, well, geez, this is all new tech, guys. We're not totally sure if the predictions from the model will translate cleanly to humans in real life. But the counter to that is fair. Yes, that's still a risk. But there's also a risk when you're doing things with rats and mice and then larger animals. There's a risk that might not map cleanly to humans in real life. So there's kind of risks on both sides of the ledger, and that in the AI worlds, yes, we still have to figure out how well this translates, but it's possible there's no more risk in the AI than there is with mice. But also, by the way, we're not killing just crap loads of mice and rats anymore.
Right. And that's exactly right. And just like, kind of as an aside, the regulatory framework around working with animals in a research setting that allows you to work with them is a nightmare. like, like, my model organism that I've worked with my whole professional career is actually fruit
Mm-hmm.
flies, which actually are a pretty great model for human aging. And I've always felt very lucky to work with fruit flies because, as I say, they're not cute, they don't have backbones, they don't have fur, so they don't need attorneys. And it's true. I mean, my husband's a pathology professor at USC at Keck Medicine, and to maintain his licensing to be able to work with his animals in his research, and he's getting called on by the veterinarians every other day because a certain rat looks sick or a mice looks sick or something like that. It's just the regulation just to work with animals is crazy. And then that's not even, and that's just mice and rats I'm talking about. That doesn't even get up when you have like a serious drug candidate and you want to test it in like primates.
Mm-hmm.
Testing in primates is insane. Like, usually they only let you use like maybe between 2 and 5 of them. So your sample size is low anyways. And the regulatory framework around working with animals is very stringent. And it should be, animals should be protected. Like they have a right to exist, and we're the ones who said they had to be laboratory test creatures. And I don't know whether you're ideologically opposed to that or not, whatever. It's a huge regulatory burden, and it's a huge time burden in terms of drug discovery for products that could actually help people who are suffering from diseases. Whereas if you have like an AI model of the human systems biology and the human body and how it works, not only are you removing that regulatory framework and you're removing that time of working with the animals and everything like that, but you could also vastly expand your sample size. Think about it. If you have a computer model of a human body, you can, not necessarily copy it, but the AI can produce more and more models of people possibly with different genetic backgrounds, different genetic mutations and stuff like that. And the simulation can be run using AI. You have a huge, much bigger sample size of actual human simulation versus this like regulatory intensive, maybe approximate model that you have with the animals.
Got it. So, what are the risks here? I'm guessing there must be a catch. I'm guessing there must be, well, this is promising. We're all excited, but let's acknowledge the risks and challenges that have to be overcome. Like, you mentioned that for example, you mentioned that AI can just replicate these models and do them again and again. And so you can have instead of a sample size of 5 primates, you can have like 2,000 and be appropriate sample size experiment. But is there a risk that if the model itself, if this data model has an imperfection in it, has a flaw that we overlooked, then yeah, we're doing it 2,000 times, but in each of these there's the same flaw. So we're not really getting a appropriate and real result.
Of course, and that's exactly what
Yeah.
you've said, and that's kind of where we are right now in this sort of growth period where we have both. We have both like the AI systems, and then we still have the traditional animal systems, animal testing infrastructure. And right now, what that's kind of allowing to do is to validate the AI systems against the animal modeling systems. As more drugs come to market that were completely AI built from the ground up, and similar drugs are kind of slowly making it across like the animal pipeline, you're going to see over the next 10 years or so that the AI drugs are ending up being just as good, or at least better than the ones that went through the traditional pipeline. And that's I think where the proof will really be, is when we see like the actual AI drugs starting to come to market and people realizing that they don't kill massive amounts of people, and they actually they have less side effects than these drugs that were tested in animals. And because that's also predictive modeling that you can do with AI, is predict the type of side effects that you're going to see with a system, within a system. So I think right now we're in that growth and kind of validation period right now, where we have both systems that are working right now, and you're going to see one system slowly overtake the other.
To kind of give a sense of why this all truly matters and what the upside is here, let's have a little fun. What are types of diseases? What are possible breakthroughs that could happen that you think are actually in play here? Are we talking like curing cancer? What are like? Let's go pie in the sky. What are we talking? What's in play here?
Yeah, pie in the sky. So number one, I think the most obvious area where AI will do the most good is rare diseases, diseases where it's not necessarily commercially viable for a big pharma to go after treating them. But there are people who are suffering, but maybe the number of people are not large enough that you could really conduct huge trials or spend the money on huge human trials for those rare diseases. Um, and that's one of the reasons like rare disease drugs, the ones that are developed, take an enormously long amount of time, just because there just simply aren't that many people suffering from them. But obviously that doesn't make them any less significant, because there are people who are suffering. So I think AI really has a chance to really help effective drug development for rare diseases, and this can be anything from like rare genetic mutations, cancers that have a really unique genetic signature. Yeah, things like that. Like, I mean, even like going into like the specific ways people have reacted to COVID infections. Some of those seem to be very rare, but have like a very specific niche group of people that are suffering from them. I think that's one of like the more exciting things about AI. From an altruist, like humanity, like type perspective, is that it really if there's this huge efficiency and this huge cost savings in the drug discovery, then it will be easier for drug companies to develop these drugs that are needed.
Okay, so let's dig into Rejuve. Let's start with your goal and mission.
Okay, so Rejuve is we have the goal of bringing healthy longevity to everyone and to democratizing um, the scientific research around health and longevity. And so I've been in longevity science for 20 years now. I started in Michael Rose's lab at UC Irvine. He's a pretty famous longevity scientist. And that's where I met my model organism, my fruit flies, the Methuselah flies that have been selectively bred over 43 generations now to live 8 times longer than a normal fruit fly. I mean, if you're going to do the same experiment in humans, it would take 10,000 years. And so we've done it in 43. Wow. Obviously, I have not been working on it that entire time, but I took over in 2008. And so our goal is to extend the healthy portion of people's lives. So instead of having this like 10-year long downward spiral at the end of your life, you are healthy up until the day you die, and then eventually maybe death itself can be an optional thing. But that's a little bit of a different conversation. That's a much more optimistic, different conversation. Right, next podcast. But for now, we're going to focus on treating aging and extending the healthy part of human life. And you have to think about this kind of from a perspective. What it really is preventative medicine is what we're trying to really get off the ground here. And preventive medicine is a little bit difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, because they're kind of like, why would I treat a disease that I don't have? But if you think about it from the perspective of treating aging, so aging is something that we all have, right? You say you're treating aging and thereby preventing these other diseases, then you have preventative medicine, but you've got a treatment pathway that you're following. So it's a little bit easier for people to wrap their heads around. And so if you treat the underlying mechanisms of aging, then you are kind of naturally able to prevent a lot of cancers, prevent dementia, prevent some forms of diabetes, prevent like withering, weakness, just all around.
Tell me about what you've learned so far. I understand there's some fruit flies breakthroughs.
Yeah. So my fruit flies. So one of the giant data sets that we're including in our platform is called Flybase, which is exactly how it sounds. It's basically like the wealth of Drosophila knowledge that exists. And fruit flies are really useful as a model organism. As humans, we share about 70% of our genome with them. And in particular, the ways in which they age are very similar to
Hmm.
ours. They, they kind of just, they have this very similar sort of damage accumulation, loss of adaptation way of aging that we experience as well. And a lot of their genes, we have what are called orthologs. So those are pieces of genetic information that are preserved not only in code, so how they're written in the genome, but also in function across our species. And so importing Flybase into our bioatom space platform allows us to see all the commonalities between the human genome and the fly genome and what kind of inferences that we can make. So in the case of our Methuselah flies, our super long-lived fruit flies, which they currently live about six months, which is a very long time for a fruit fly. We've analyzed their genome of my long-lived flies and their transcriptome, so how their genes are expressed. And we found like 4 very specific transcription factors that are different in the Methuselah flies versus the control flies.
Hmm.
So transcription factor is a particular gene that also influences how a bunch of other genes can be transcribed as
Mm-hmm.
well. So each one of these transcription factors influences like dozens to thousands of genes. And they are kind of in the neighborhood of what you'd expect in terms of function. If you think of an organism that lives a long time, these flies have superior metabolism function. They have superior circadian rhythm
Mm-hmm.
function. Their muscle cells are much stronger. They regenerate better. They have better autophagy, which is your cells' ability to rid themselves of waste, and they're more stress
Hmm.
resistant. So we found these transcription factors that kind of specifically code for all of those optimal things. And there's tons of genes that those influence that there are also human orthologs to those genes. And so our specific platform is using, we have this unique data set in these flies. There aren't other companies that are using this data set specifically. And so that gives us like a whole um, kind of advantage that we have this really well honed longevity model organism that we can study that is a real whole system and compare that to our human system and then use the AI to make the inferences and generate the hypotheses between the two systems of what drugs might work and where we can go in terms of setting healthy aging and how to best improve.
Is the idea that this model kind of gives you a north star, thanks to our good friends the fruit flies, and in this case the super long living, like 8x longer super fruit flies. We're looking like
Yeah,
you've identified the 5 or 6 or 7 key factors that help explain how they're living so freaking long, and each one of those is kind of like a north star and saying, all right, how, given we know there's similarities
right,
between human genome and the fruit fly's genome, what can we do to boost our odds of getting like factor 1 or factor 3 to get from where it is now to like super
right,
fruit fly level? And then you're using AI to make those inferences and
right.
potentially, I'm making this up, potentially either developed drugs that can directly improve that, these like 5 or 6 kind of variables, that the drug, like a pill that could directly improve those, or maybe both, suggest other non-pharmaceutical interventions to say, okay, we know these fruit flies are doing these 6 things really, really well, so we should do these things in our lives to live more like fruit flies, to live longer. Am I getting that overall approach right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And the fruit flies also serve another function in that if we want to test a particular drug that the AI tells us might
Mm-hmm.
work, I can very quickly test them in a real world model of the fruit
Yeah.
flies, which will take less time than a mice or a
Yeah.
rat. So it's also a model organism that is much easier to work with and takes less time on the actual traditional animal research front as well. We do have I have had a little bit of a proof of concept in that in my career, and with my first biotech company, which used the same fruit flies, we identified some of these genes that were involved in neurological function and decided to kind of go down the road of researching Alzheimer's disease. And we developed a model in fruit flies for Alzheimer's disease, which was really actually a really fascinating model. You induce the pathology in transgenic fruit flies, so fruit flies that have genes for Alzheimer's pathology. They produce either the beta amyloid protein or the tau protein, and you can induce the pathology in them, and the flies lose the ability
Hmm.
to crawl. And so we had the AI identify some non-pharmaceutical substances, so substances that were popular in traditional Chinese medicine, actually, that gave an indication of acting on these
Hmm.
pathways. And now this was about 13 years ago now, so there was still a lot of kind of manual legwork that had to be done with this by researching various papers and validating not only the targets but the natural substances that we were going to use. But we eventually came up with this combination that we were able to test in the fruit flies by feeding it to them at their appropriate weight ratio. And we were able to restore crawling ability and
Wow.
lifespan to these Alzheimer's disease
Wow.
flies. And then we took it a step further. We found a really open-minded
Hmm.
neurologist in Newport Beach here in Southern California at Hoag Hospital, who was able to get together 50 of his Alzheimer's patients to volunteer to take this supplement and add it to their normal regimen of Alzheimer's drugs. And in that group, we had about 30 people that fell into the mild to moderate category. And over the course of 15 months, they maintained their cognition.
Wow.
Um, we didn't have the money at the time to do mechanism of action or biomarker studies, so it was all
Mm-hmm.
functional cognitive tests. But they really maintained their function.
Wow.
I've seen it work before, and that was an AI identified supplement.
Wow. All right. So as we wind this down, that's an incredible story you just shared about the Alzheimer's. What are some additional hopes you have with Rejuve Bio as far as what you're looking to treat and solve and improve going forward in the next few years or decade?
So hopes and dreams for Rejuve Bio. I think that we really have an opportunity to democratize biomedical research and allow everybody to participate, and not only participate but also be compensated for their participation. Um, for me, I, as a born and bred biologist, I'm really excited at the opportunity of developing a real, robust, diverse
Mm-hmm.
human data set through our partnership
Mm-hmm.
with Rejuve AI and the Longevity app. I mean, we already have a couple thousand beta testers all
Mm-hmm.
over the world, and as we've seen, the data that we do have in biomedical research right now is pretty biased, because when you think about human trials, typically the only people that really have the time and the resources to participate tend to skew rich and
Yep.
white, which gives us a very limited
Mm-hmm.
data set for which to make these inferences off of, even
Mm-hmm.
using the AI. And so one of the real advantages I see with the Rejuve project is this opportunity to start to chip away at some of those
Mm-hmm.
biases in biomedical research, really have a diverse human data set, and then encourage those people to participate in this biomedical research by actually compensating them for their participation and letting them have some ownership over the creation of pharmaceuticals or supplements or various interventions that will not only improve their healthy longevity and their health span, but also make it accessible to people who wouldn't necessarily have access to those treatments in a traditional healthcare system. That's my big dream for the whole project.
One final question for you on a more kind of a fun short term note. How are you using AI in your own life, whether for work or for fun or for just messing around?
Well, let's see. I used AI to think of some fun Halloween crafts for my kids the other day. So we did some like fun little like ghosts that we made
Uh-huh.
for Halloween, like for festive to I actually I I used a ChatGPT to help me write a grant application for a schools foundation that I'm
Awesome.
on the board of to get some funding to put in wellness centers at various schools where I live. Um, but yeah, so yeah, my personal life, I've made pretty good use of
Love it.
it.
Well, Kennedy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. I'm
Yeah.
excited about what you and Jasmine and your teams are cooking up. And thank you both for helping us live longer. Really enjoyed it.
Aw, thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much for your time.
But wait, don't go anywhere. Please stick around for part 2 of the podcast, an interview with Jasmine Smith, CEO of Rejuve AI. Now, Rejuve AI is the sister company of Rejuve Bio, whereas Rejuve Bio focuses on drug discovery. Rejuve AI focuses more on creating a more inclusive data set for drug discovery that combined with AI will hopefully yield surprising connections and health solutions with an ultimate aim for longevity to all. So please enjoy my conversation with Jasmine Smith, CEO of Rejuve AI. Jasmine, welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
So, Jasmine, what excites you about the potential for AI in drug discovery?
Well, AI can search through much larger volumes of data than any human being can, and it can combine the expertise of multiple experts, of doctors, of scientists, of researchers, nutritionists, like all the different lab and blood test data that can come into play, genomic data. It can just kind of analyze it in more of a holistic picture, and also, the drugs themselves, being able to identify more of the potential interactions and synergistic potentials, and how those can affect people on an individual basis. So really, it enables more of a personalized and preventative medicine structure than may have been possible before, especially given the increased population and demand for these kind of services.
So that's drug discovery. What are other ways that AI can help in this space that might be surprising to folks?
There's also drug repurposing, and that's kind of using something that's already kind of used for another disease and using it for something new that may not have been discovered. And yeah, on the topic of longevity, they're actually investigating a couple of those as well.
So let's dive into the science of longevity. Tell us about what you and your team are building at Rejuve AI.
Yeah, so Rejuve AI, we're building what's called a decentralized longevity research network. So we're meaning to crowdsource data from people all over the world and from the community of science to be able to just get more and more data into one platform to discover, kind of unlock human aging. Because one of the issues that we have is that a lot of the data is kind of only from particular populations. There's a lot of underserved populations in the world that we're completely not having any type of representation, and even if there was, there's no direct benefit to them, and even to more of the developed world as well. We're all putting kind of health data into various types of apps and wearing watches like these and all sorts of things, but it's not that we're actually seeing any direct benefit, at least not until way farther down the line. So that's another issue that Rejuve is tackling, is being able to reward people in real time for their health data contributions to longevity research, and being able to deliver them real world value in the form of we have a cryptocurrency token called RJV, and you can use this to redeem discounts and eventually 100% on different health enhancing products, services, such as supplements, wearables, test kits, DNA genome sequencing kits. We want to get health and wellness spas into there and consultations and all sorts of things. So we want it to kind of be a Web3 based longevity research network, pretty much, where different parties are able to collaborate.
Okay, so the idea is that the current kind of baseline of data that scientists use doesn't really reflect all of humanity. And you're building this new data set that will look more like humans in total. And that data set will kind of spark future connections that will help all people. Am I warm on that?
Yeah, that's right. And also, one of our mottos too is making longevity accessible and affordable to all. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
also involved in just kind of closing the gap between me providing data in the app and me getting real world value and benefit from that data, whether it be in the form of sharing that with a healthcare provider or actually redeeming tokens in exchange for products and services, as mentioned. Yeah, we really want to promote that message of people just kind of owning and really understanding their health data as well, where it's not like so much of this abstract concept, like lab test results and DNA. It just kind of, can look like a mishmash of things. And we want to kind of bring that into a more holistic picture and also be able to help people and meet them where they are to start having more increased and better health on a day to day basis.
Okay, so we get this more inclusive and accessible data. Once we get that data, what's the link between that and longevity? Can you kind of connect the dots on how AI fits into all of that?
Well, yeah, actually, aggregated data can also help with personalization as well, because the more that we collect, we can kind of find, these kind of profile lines of similar people like you and what's working, what's not working, and just be able to narrow down treatment methodologies, and also just being able to look at health in a very holistic picture. Like let's say you have this application, if you submitted all this lifestyle data, you're kind of daily logging your activity, your sleep, your stress levels. It's taking into account maybe I have a really busy work schedule and like this, and I'm on meetings all the time. How can I get more steps into my day and more exercise? What kind of foods can I make quickly, where I'm not spending hours cooking and all that kind of thing. So being able to generate those sorts of recommendations. And also there's different types of AI systems. The one that's underlying the first edition of our app is actually a Bayesian network. So that's based on kind of statistical averages. And what we're doing is kind of layering on deeper and deeper systems. So the most familiar one everybody knows now is the large language model, the ChatGPT sort of
Hmm.
model. And that's one that's very good at, kind of doing that kind of talking to you kind of thing and being able to search through and be like almost your personal encyclopedia. And then there's kind of simulation, and that's where we're ultimately heading, is being able to actually create a digital simulation of your body and being able to kind of test
Mm.
potential effects of what would happen if I did this and that. What would be the benefits, what would be the detriments.
You mentioned a Bayesian model. Can you briefly explain what that means? I have kind of a vague understanding that Bayesian model is rule based. Can you elaborate on how that's different from the kind of deeper learning models?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the Bayesian networks are kind of rule based, and so the rules that we used are actually based on meta analysis, and that's kind of the highest
Hmm.
standards in the scientific, because it means that they've reviewed a bunch of studies and trials at one time, and then came up with some statistics on those. So we've taken a bunch of those and put those as kind of the baseline rule set. So we're already sort of in the right region of what's the risk is if you're doing this type of behavior, what's your apparent risk of cancer, of heart disease, of this, that, and the third. And then, we layer
Hmm.
on, the language model to be able to accommodate more of those other type of factors, like, okay, I live in this country, my income level is this, like, I'm allergic to this and all that kind of thing. And then the deep learning like kind of comes in to make, these actual profiles and vectors of different individuals.
The Bayesian model, which you still have, that's still part of it. You didn't move away from
Oh no,
this
it's it's,
deep
it's going to
learning.
be in the
It's like,
first edition. Like when we launch the app, that's the first layer, and kind of like the free layer that everybody will always have access to.
okay. And then the deeper learning model might kind of sniff out insights in surprising patterns that you guys haven't thought of. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so it's like, identifying new correlations and also kind of trying to extend it to causation as well, trying to figure out
Hmm.
that layer of things, because then that's how you actually get to cures. But yeah, that's definitely correct that the AI doesn't think like a person, so it's kind of able to kind of make these strange relations that maybe wouldn't have been obvious or you wouldn't have thought of, but then you kind of analyze it stepping back, and you can see how it makes sense and how to kind of speed up a search, based on these variables.
And where are you in the timeline in all of this?
So we're launching. We're aiming to launch our app at the end of the year. So we've kind of just been in the beta testing phase right now, just kind of making sure that everything is working properly. And it's quite a complex app to build.
I can only imagine. Zooming out the lens a bit, how do you see AI impacting the healthcare space more broadly, whether that's in the hospital or in the lab room?
Well, I mean, there's kind of always like two ways that things can go. It can kind of greatly accelerate research and bring a lot of more personalized solutions and kind of catch things a lot earlier and start making people healthier sooner. And that's what I would really like to see is, you know, being able to kind of input your kind of lab data, lifestyle, whatnot, and it tell you you're at risk right now for this, and this is your percentage. If you take these actions, over the course of this amount of time, you can reverse this or stop it in its tracks. That would be what I really want to see. But then on the other side, there's always the profit motivations to kind of just push things out and make more money. That doesn't always necessarily help someone in real time, and it's kind of just a symptom masker. And I would like to kind of see things kind of move away from that. That we don't let people get to the point of that they're so ill that they're barely holding on before they can get a treatment, but that we're kind of early prevention and intervention.
What do you see as the biggest challenge in helping us tip more toward bucket one than bucket two?
Yeah, I think it is related to both education and politics because it's kind of like we have to make the societal case that it's better for there to be more healthy, younger, or like biologically younger people walking around and contributing to the economy and buying and selling and doing things than it is to have a bunch of filled up hospital beds of people that can barely move. So I think that if we kind of
That feels like a pretty. I mean, who would be against that? Go ahead.
So yeah, I think because I don't think we can take away the profit motivation aspect of because
Yeah.
everybody wants to make money, everybody wants to be successful. So it's just that we have to start rethinking what that success means and kind of seeing how having a healthier population actually leads to greater prosperity.
Okay, now let's zooming out the lens even further. Let's have a little fun here. How could the healthcare look differently in 5 years, maybe 10 years, if AI is kind of fully embraced? What do you see, and how could that impact people's lives?
Yeah, kind of as mentioned, I think that we can sort of maybe intervene a lot sooner. Like we can even start, in childhood, kind of giving, the parents a recommendation of this is, things you could look out for and like what you should maybe feed them, not feed them, or like, being able to just have a more of a wellness kind of based culture that would really be a good thing. But then also, yeah, just I mean, because already, you go to a doctor and it's kind of they're clicking off these questions on a screen or whatnot. But what if this data, instead of it just being stored and kind of filed away and then disconnected when you go to another provider, that you're able to have all this data in one place and have it all be interconnected and constantly being analyzed and updated, giving more up-to-date insights and recommendations for everyday life.
Love that. And as we wind down here, tell us, how are you personally using AI for either work or for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a user of ChatGPT and Claude. Yes, just for researching, improving the app, and also, yeah, just for personal uses as well. Being able to kind of get a more holistic search of something, like maybe just Googling something doesn't give enough of a comprehensive overview. I can just say, tell me, and you can be very expressive and creative with your question type with these AI. So it can kind of give you a response that's very well articulated and thought out. And then I'm able to kind of go deeper into a certain line that I want to go into. So yeah, I do kind of use it for everyday purposes for both work and leisure.
Jasmine, I love that you kind of nudge it to kind of get more expressive. Can you share a little more about how you do that?
Yeah, like kind of if you, let's say you type in um, a certain question, usually the more wordy that you get with it, the less accurate the responses were going to be. It's like, okay, they give you the right result one, government website, result two, kind of the more common, most read news article or whatever. But you're not going to actually get an analysis of what that could mean,
Mm.
what the different angles of thought could be on a subject matter. Um, with the kind of the pros and cons, or the sort of opposing viewpoints versus agreements and things like that. So you can look at, like, let's say a controversial issue, and maybe you get a whole picture of what everybody thinks about it without kind of reading 25 links at one time or something.
Oh, amazing. So like, what do you say in the prompt to kind of get it to yield a more comprehensive answer, if you'll indulge us?
I guess maybe I'll give a random example. Like, maybe I want to know about longevity of pharaohs in ancient Egypt or something like that, because a lot of times we think,
As we all
because a lot of times we think of the life expectancy being so low back then, but then you go into a museum and they say, oh, this pharaoh reigned for 90 years, so like obviously he lived to be 100 and something, and we don't know about that. So you can say compare and contrast longevity in the ancient world to longevity today. What could have been factors that influence why this person was able to defy it? Comparing that it was similar to now. Okay, they were super rich. They probably had better medical care and accessibility to things, and kind of drawing the parallels in between the scenarios today and the type of medicaments and lifestyle that they might have had compared to today, and things like that.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Yeah.
Jasmine, this is super fun. Thanks so much. Best of luck to you and to Rejuve AI, and of course to Kennedy and Rejuve Bio. Good luck on your launch, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
There you have it. Thanks again to Jasmine Smith, CEO of Rejuve AI, and to Kennedy Schaal, CEO of Rejuve Bio. And thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the first double feature on AI Curious. Hope you enjoyed. This is your weekly reminder to please subscribe to the podcast in Apple or Spotify or your favorite podcast platform of choice, and to send it to a friend or foe or drug manufacturer of your choice. And please rate it 5 stars and all that good stuff. Thanks again, and see you next time.